Disclaimer: the following story explores mature emotional themes involving family dynamics, personal boundaries, and psychological tension. It does not contain explicit material. Viewer discretion is advised. I always thought of myself as someone who could handle almost anything. I'd been through a messy divorce, rebuilt my career from scratch, and even moved to a whole new city to start over. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for what happened that night. What my stepson did left me lying awake, staring at the ceiling, unable to breathe normally. And the worst part is, I still don't know if it was intentional or if I'm just losing my mind. My name is Dana. I'm 42, and I've been married to Mark for a little over 2 years. He's calm, patient, the type who always sees the best in people, even when he probably shouldn't. That's something I admire about him. But when it comes to his son, Liam, well, let's just say his blind spot is massive. Liam is 22, tall, quiet, and painfully polite in that way that makes you question if it's genuine or just well-rehearsed. He moved in with us about 4 months ago after dropping out of college to figure things out. I didn't object. Mark was thrilled to have him home, and I wanted to believe we could be one of those rare blended families that actually gets along. At first, things were fine. Liam mostly kept to himself, and I respected his space. I even tried to make little gestures, his favorite snacks in the pantry, knocking before entering shared spaces. He never gave me a reason to feel uncomfortable. Not until recently. It started with small things. Doors left unlocked late at night. My clothes in the laundry room moved from one basket to another, even though I'd asked everyone not to touch my stuff. Once, I came home early and found him in the kitchen, staring out the window. I said hi, and he didn't even flinch. Just kept looking, like he was waiting for something. I told myself it was nothing. New living dynamics always come with friction. But then came that night. It was late. Mark was out of town on a business trip, and the house was dead quiet. I was in bed, half asleep, when I heard the softest sound. Not footsteps, more like fabric brushing against wood. My heart jumped, but I told myself it was just the wind. I rolled over and tried to settle back in, but something felt off. Like I wasn't alone. I opened my eyes, and there, just past the crack in my slightly open door, I saw it. A shadow. Someone standing completely still, not moving, not speaking. Just watching. I sat up sharply, heart pounding. "Liam?" I called out, my voice shaking. The shadow moved, slowly, and disappeared down the hall without a word. I jumped out of bed, turned on every light I could, and found him in the living room, casually scrolling through his phone like nothing had happened. "Did you need something just now?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. He looked up at me with this unreadable expression. "No." "Why?" My stomach dropped. I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to believe him. But the look in his eyes told me something else. Something I still can't explain. That night, I didn't sleep at all. And in the morning, I found something in the hallway that made everything so much worse. By the time the sun rose, I was still sitting on the edge of my bed, every muscle in my body tight from hours of listening for sounds that never came. My coffee went cold on the nightstand. I couldn't shake the image of Liam standing in the hallway, silent, still, and strangely unreadable. I kept asking myself, why didn't he say anything? Why didn't he knock? But those questions didn't have simple answers. Mark called around 7 a.m. His voice was light, casual, filled with the usual morning small talk. I almost told him everything, but the words jammed in my throat. What was I supposed to say? "Hey, your son might have been watching me sleep last night," or maybe I imagined it because I'm overtired and paranoid. I couldn't risk sounding irrational, not about something like this. After we hung up, I stepped into the hallway. That's when I saw it. On the floor, just outside my door, was one of my scarves. Not one I wear often. It had been in my closet. Folded. Untouched. I picked it up slowly, like it might bite. My skin crawled. I wanted to confront Liam, but I needed to understand him better first. Not just the surface level, he's a quiet kid version Mark always gave me. So I started digging. Over the next couple days, I watched him more closely, how he never locked his bedroom door, how he always wore noise-canceling headphones, but somehow heard everything. I noticed how he avoided eye contact when we were alone, but stared openly when Mark was around, like he was performing normalcy. I asked Mark once what Liam had been like as a kid. Smart, he said, but sensitive. His mom babysat him too much, I think. After she died, he changed. Got real withdrawn. Wouldn't talk for weeks. Therapy didn't help much. I figured he just needed space. Space. It was always space with Liam. But the kind of space he seemed to need was the kind that kept people at arm's length while quietly pulling their attention toward him. One night, about a week after the scarf incident, I decided to test him. I left my bedroom door wide open and pretended to fall asleep early. I dimmed the lights just enough to see shadows moving if they did. My heart pounded so loud I thought he might hear it from his room. I lay there for almost 2 hours, still as stone. And then, there it was. The soft creak of the hallway floorboards. I didn't move. I couldn't. I kept my eyes barely open, and sure enough, Liam appeared. He stood just outside the threshold. He didn't step inside. Just looked like before. But this time I saw his face. It wasn't blank. It wasn't lifeless. It was curious. Like he was trying to figure something out about me. As if I was some kind of puzzle, and he didn't like not knowing how I worked. After a moment, he backed away again, slowly, silently, and disappeared into the dark. I didn't sleep that night either. The next morning, I went into his room while he was in the shower. I know I shouldn't have. I know it was a violation. But I had to understand what was happening. What I found in his closet changed everything. And now, I don't know what to do. I didn't know what I expected to find in Liam's closet, maybe some of my missing things, or signs of obsession I could show Mark as proof. But what I found was worse. It was a small box tucked behind a stack of old textbooks. Inside were photos. Printed ones. Most of them were blurry, like they'd been taken in secret. Me in the kitchen. Me walking to the mailbox. Me asleep on the couch. My heart practically stopped. There were at least a dozen of them, some I recognized as moments when I thought I was alone. Others I didn't remember at all. The strangest part? None of them were sexual. No nudity. No clear invasion of privacy, yet the feeling was the same. Violated. Watched. Hunted, even. I put the box back exactly as I found it, careful not to leave a trace. Then I locked myself in the bathroom and just sat on the floor, shaking. This wasn't paranoia anymore. This was real. This was happening. But how do you tell your husband that his adult son has been secretly photographing you? How do you even begin that conversation without shattering something you can't put back together? I needed time. I needed a plan. So I called my sister. Talia's the kind of person who always knows what to do, tough, blunt, zero tolerance for gray areas. She listened without interrupting, then gave it to me straight. You have to leave. You need to get out of that house and stay somewhere safe. This isn't about protecting Mark's feelings. It's about protecting yourself. She was right. But the idea of packing a bag and just disappearing felt impossible. I didn't want to abandon Mark. I didn't want to believe his son might be dangerous. So I made a deal with myself. One more night. Just one. And if anything else happened, I'd leave and tell Mark everything. That night, I locked my door. At 2:13 a.m., I woke to the softest knock. 3 taps. Then silence. I didn't move. 5 minutes passed. Then a piece of paper was slid under the door. I waited until I heard retreating footsteps, then crawled to the edge of the bed and picked it up. It was a sketch. Pencil on plain white paper. It was me. Not just a drawing. A study. Every curve of my face, every strand of hair. I looked peaceful, gentle, almost angelic. And that's what scared me the most. This wasn't just someone with boundary issues. This was someone who had created an entire narrative in his head, one where I played a role I never agreed to. The next morning, I left early and met Talia at a cafe across town. I told her everything. She looked me in the eyes and said, "You have to tell Mark. He deserves to know, even if it breaks him." But when I got home, Mark was already there. And Liam was sitting on the back porch, waiting. As I stepped out of the car, Liam stood and smiled. Like he knew. Like he had heard everything. And now, whatever came next, would be on his terms. I didn't move. I couldn't. My feet stayed planted on the driveway while Liam stood on the back porch, hands in his pockets, eyes locked on mine like he'd been rehearsing this moment. His smile wasn't wide or warm, it was subtle, calculated, like a checkmate after a long, silent game. Mark came outside, oblivious to the tension hanging between us. "Hey, babe. You're home early. Everything okay?" He kissed my cheek, but I couldn't take my eyes off Liam. He didn't look away either. "I just needed some air," I murmured, barely able to speak through the pressure building in my chest. Liam nodded like we had some unspoken agreement. That sketch, the one he slid under my door, was still folded in my purse. My fingers twitched toward it. I wanted to shove it into Mark's hands right then and there, scream at him to see what I'd been living with. But Mark wouldn't understand. Not yet. Not until he was ready to see the son he thought he knew for who he really was. So instead, I smiled tightly and said, "I need to talk to you. Privately." We went inside. Liam stayed on the porch, but I felt his presence through the walls. Watching. Waiting. I took Mark into the bedroom, closed the door, and finally told him everything quietly but clearly. I showed him the scarf, the photos, the sketch. At first, he stared at the items like they were fake. Props in some cruel performance. He wouldn't. "He's never, Dana. This doesn't make sense." "It doesn't have to," I said. "It's still happening." He rubbed his hands through his hair, pacing. "Maybe he's just confused. Maybe it's grief. You know how much he struggled after his mom died. Grief doesn't make someone follow you. It doesn't make someone draw you in your sleep." My voice cracked, and for the first time, I saw it hit him. The weight of it. The reality. But before he could speak again, we heard it. The sound of something shattering. We bolted into the hallway. The picture frame from our wedding, the one that sat on the living room shelf, was on the floor, glass everywhere. And Liam was standing over it, breathing heavy, face flushed. "I didn't mean to," he said softly, not looking at us. "I just knocked it over." Mark took a cautious step forward. "Liam, what's going on?" Liam looked at me then. Just me. And, for the first time, I saw it. Anger. Raw, unfiltered anger behind his normally blank expression. "I just wanted her to see me," he whispered. "She walks around here like I don't exist." Mark froze. "Liam. You replaced her," Liam said, louder this time. "You took her place. I watched this house fall apart after she died, and now you're here, sleeping in her bed, touching her things. You pretend like this is your home, but it's not." Mark stepped between us, but Liam didn't move. His eyes burned into me like fire through glass. "I thought you understood me," he said, almost hurt. "I thought you were different." That's when I realized it wasn't just obsession. It was delusion. Liam didn't see me as a stepmother. He didn't see boundaries, or roles, or right and wrong. He saw what he wanted to see. And now that I'd broken that illusion, he was unraveling. Mark told him to go to his room, to cool off. Liam walked away slowly, but not before turning to me one last time. "She shouldn't have left," he said. "But maybe you don't have to." And with that, he vanished down the hall. Mark spent the rest of the night sitting in the den, head in his hands, barely speaking. I sat on the opposite end of the couch, watching the door to Liam's room like it might burst open at any moment. We didn't talk much. There wasn't much to say. How do you process the possibility that your child has mentally unraveled right in front of you? Around 4 a.m., Mark finally stood up and said, "I'll take him to a therapist. First thing in the morning. I don't care what it costs." But deep down, I knew it was already too late for that. Still, I nodded. I wanted to believe this was something that could be fixed. That maybe with the right help, Liam could see the line he'd crossed and find his way back to normal. That illusion shattered before sunrise. I was in the kitchen pouring coffee when Mark came in, pale and shaken. He didn't say anything at first, just held up a small flash drive. "I found this in Liam's desk," he said, "hidden under a false bottom." We plugged it into the laptop. There were folders, each named after a different woman, each filled with videos, photos, typed notes. Detailed notes, routines, favorite drinks, daily habits. Most were strangers, but one of the folders stopped me cold. It had my name. Inside were photos I hadn't seen before. One from the backyard, through the living room window. One of me on the treadmill at the gym. One taken during a lunch I'd had with Talia 2 months ago inside the cafe. I hadn't even known Liam was there. But it got worse. A document, just one paragraph, titled "Her Weaknesses." It listed things I had told only Mark, that I couldn't sleep without white noise, that sudden loud noises made me panic, that I felt guilty about leaving my first marriage. Mark went pale. I never told him that. He must have listened. Through the vents or... I don't know how. Suddenly, everything clicked. Liam didn't just have an unhealthy attachment. He'd been studying me. For months. Quietly, obsessively. Building a case. A fantasy. A script. I backed away from the computer. "We have to go to the police." Mark hesitated. "Dana, he's not dangerous. He's just sick." But I could see in his eyes that even he didn't believe that anymore. Before we could move, the front door opened. Liam walked in, calm, holding 2 cups of coffee from the corner shop like it was any other morning. His smile faded as he saw the laptop, the flash drive in Mark's hand. No one spoke. Then, quietly, Liam said, "You weren't supposed to see that yet." Mark's voice broke. "Liam, what is this?" Liam looked at me, not with shame, but disappointment. "She was supposed to choose me," he said. "But now, you ruined it." He placed one of the coffees on the counter and walked back out the door, just like that. But he left his phone behind. Curious, I picked it up. The wallpaper wasn't a photo of him, or even of me. It was a picture of Mark. Young, smiling, holding Liam as a baby. And underneath it was a quote, "You replaced her. But he replaced me." It hit me all at once. This wasn't just about me. It was about Mark. This was an obsession with me, it was revenge. And I was the stand-in. Mark didn't sleep that night. I barely even sat down. Every noise in the house felt too loud, too sharp. Liam hadn't come home after he left with those coffees. His phone was still on the counter. His bag, keys, jacket, all untouched. By morning, Mark had reached his limit. He called the police. I watched him from the hallway as he explained the photos, the flash drive, the stalking. His voice was calm, but I could hear the crack underneath it. This wasn't just about protecting me anymore. This was about accepting the truth he'd been avoiding for years, that something inside his son had changed, and maybe it had always been there. Officers arrived around noon. They took the drive, the printed photos, and Mark's statement. I gave mine too, my hands trembling the entire time. One of the officers promised to circulate a bolo, be on the lookout, just in case Liam tried to leave town. But the twist wasn't out there. It was waiting inside the house. That evening, I went into the garage to grab a box of old files we kept for tax season. The light flickered when I turned it on. As I bent to move the storage bin, I noticed something strange on the floor, chalk markings. Circles. Arrows. A line that pointed toward the side wall. At first I thought it was nothing, maybe old markings from a repair job. But then I followed it. There was a small seam in the drywall. When I pressed it, the panel clicked open. Inside was a crawl space. Dusty. Cold. I grabbed a flashlight and looked inside. There were photos. Again. But not just of me. Of Mark. Dozens. Some going back years. Images of Mark shaving. Tying his tie. Sitting alone in the backyard with a beer. Reading in bed. Liam hadn't just been watching me. He'd been watching his father. Some photos had red markings. Others had captions. One read, "He forgets easily." Another, "He only loved her. Never me." And one, taped in the center of the crawl space, made my blood freeze. It was of me and Mark laughing at a restaurant last fall. Underneath, Liam had scrawled, "She has what I was owed." I backed out of the crawl space, shaking, just as Mark appeared in the doorway. He looked at me. "What is it?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. Because right then, we both heard the front door creak open. The officers had just left an hour ago. Mark moved fast, grabbing the bat from behind the water heater and motioning for me to stay back. We stepped into the hallway together. The house was silent. Then Liam's voice echoed from the living room. "I came back to say goodbye." We found him sitting on the couch, calm, composed, like nothing had happened. The same smile on his face. But in his lap was something different this time. A small, leather-bound journal. He handed it to Mark without a word. Inside were pages and pages of thoughts. Disconnected, rambling, chilling. It wasn't just about me. Or Mark. It was about his mother. About her death. About being replaced in every way. Mark flipped through in silence. When he reached the last page, his shoulders slumped. Something inside him gave out. "I'm getting help," Liam said, softly. "But not here." 2 officers entered seconds later. Liam didn't resist. He didn't argue. He just said, "Tell her I didn't hate her. I just didn't know what to do with the emptiness." And then he was gone. Mark stood frozen in the doorway. I stepped beside him, slipping my hand into his. We didn't speak. There was nothing left to say. But as we stood there, watching the patrol car pull away, I realized the truth. We hadn't just survived Liam. We'd survived what silence creates. After the police took Liam away, the house felt quieter than it had in weeks, maybe even years. But it wasn't peaceful. It was a silence filled with grief, confusion, and that hollow feeling you get when something breaks and can't quite be put back together the way it was. Mark spent most of the night reading through Liam's journal. He didn't speak much. I knew he was trying to make sense of everything, not just what Liam had done, but what he had missed as a father. That guilt sat heavy on his chest. For so long, he thought his silence was protection. Now he realized it had been a shield for him, not for Liam. The next morning, we both called out of work. We needed the time not just to process, but to talk. Really talk. "I keep wondering," he said quietly, "if I caused this. If I failed him." I reached for his hand. "You didn't fail him, Mark. You did what you could. But you can't fix someone who doesn't let you in." It wasn't about blame anymore. It was about healing. Over the next few days, we got updates from the authorities. Liam had been placed in a psychiatric facility for evaluation. It turned out this wasn't his first spiral. He'd had episodes in college, but had hidden them well. He wasn't violent. But he was deeply broken inside, carrying unresolved grief from his mother's death and an identity crisis that had slowly rotted into obsession. Mark visited him a few weeks later. I didn't go. It wasn't anger that kept me away, it was closure. I had forgiven him in my own way, but I also needed boundaries to feel safe again. Mark understood that. He came back from the visit with tears in his eyes, but also something else, clarity. "He's not the same kid I raised," he told me. But I saw glimpses of him. He's trying. In the months that followed, Mark and I took steps to rebuild. Therapy helped. So did honest conversations, long walks, and letting go of the idea of a perfect family. We learned that sometimes love isn't enough to stop someone from going down a dark path. But love can be enough to help them find their way back. Liam eventually agreed to stay in treatment long-term. He began writing letters, not just to Mark, but to me too. They weren't excuses. just reflections. In one, he wrote, "I confused obsession with love. You didn't deserve that. I hope one day you'll remember me not for what I became, but for what I tried to fix." I keep that letter in a drawer, not to revisit the pain, but to remind myself of how far we've come. Today, our house feels different. Not perfect, but peaceful, honest, strong. And we've made a choice to never let silence sit where truth needs to be. Did you enjoy the story? What kind of stories would you like to hear next? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear from you.